Hello and welcome to another coffee related video. In this box here I have hopefully a cool new coffee gadget that is, fingers crossed, the all-in-one bean to cup coffee solution that I've been looking for a long time. Now those of you who followed my coffee related videos on this channel may remember that some years ago, 5 years ago, in fact, I actually had to look that up on the channel. 5 years ago, it's frightening. I bought and reviewed a gadget that was supposed to be, or that I'd hoped to be, that all-in-one solution. That was the Cafflano Classic. Sadly, it fell flat on its face at the first hurdle with a very badly designed grinder, which gave a horribly inconsistent grind and effectively made it absolutely useless, because anybody who loves coffee and grinds their own beans knows that if you cannot get a consistent grind, you cannot get a consistent coffee. So sadly, that was that. It went back. There were some unpleasant exchanges from the designer, which despite my trying to be as positive as possible and give some feedback, it wasn't taken on board, but what can you say? But recently there was a Kickstarter campaign launched, and I saw the advert for it and I read the specs and the details, and I thought, you know what, I like the sound of this. This sounds like it could be the device that's going to be what I wanted the Cafflano to be. This particular thing is called the BEANQUE. Now, I do hope that I'm pronouncing that correctly. It's BEANQUE. I'm not sure how else you could pronounce it. I'll put on the bottom of the screen, just down here, I'll put the name. It was a Kickstarter campaign. It has just arrived. It actually just arrived a couple of days ago, but unfortunately I've been that busy, so this is the first chance I've gotten to filming it. So, without boring you any further with waffle, let's take it out of the box and have a look and see what we've got. So the BEANQUE coffee maker arrived in an outer box, just slightly larger than this, and then this packaging. I'm actually a big fan of minimal packaging. It's adequate to protect it, it does what it needs to do. And I'm a huge fan of minimal packaging because big fancy packets might look nice, but ultimately they're not great for the environment, are they? So I do like minimal packaging, so good on you for doing that. Inside we've got the coffee maker itself, which we'll take out, and we'll just shake out the contents, and you can see we've got an empty box there, so we will pop that to one side. We've got a sheet with double-sided A5 size sheet with printed instructions, quite straightforward. We've got a small brush, which is obviously to aid in cleaning out the grinder. We've got a charging cable. First thing I notice about this is actually a micro USB type B connector, and I do recall the advert said type C, so we'll have a look at that on the device in a moment. And here in this little bag we have got, we've got a little bulb blower, which again I'm assuming is to aid in cleaning out the coffee grinder. It's actually very similar to the one I use for my watchmaking, just maybe a little smaller, yeah, very similar. So I'm just going to pop those to the side, and let's take the packaging from the BEANQUE coffee maker. So looking at that, yes, that is actually a micro USB type B connector, although the Kickstarter campaign did say a type C. It doesn't really matter, they all do the same thing, but obviously just there to note the discrepancy, the difference there. So being a type B connector, of course, anyone who's got Android devices will have these kind of connectors all over the place. This doesn't come with a wall socket adapter, but of course you can use any wall socket adapter like you'd use for your mobile, but you can plug this into your car or any USB port, which I'm going to be doing in just a moment. So We've got a light there, so we'll have a look at that in a moment. But first of all, we'll just take this apart. So we've got a measuring beaker with a line for measuring the amount of coffee beans, and then for your water. And on this side, this is a pouring spout, which allows you to give a controlled pour for the pour over coffee. Here is the tumbler, which is a double wall insulated stainless steel tumbler. This is obviously the basket where the coffee grounds fall into, and then this, there we go, has these little flip out arms which flip out and hook onto there, where we can then pour the water for the pour over coffee. We've got this main unit which we can charge up, and this of course is the grinder, and this being the adjustment for the burr grinder. At the top we have got, this unscrews, and I suspect that this, yes indeed, this becomes the lid for your tumbler. It has a little pop-up carry handle and a seal so you can unseal and drink your coffee. That's quite nifty. So it goes from being, goes from being the top of the grinder to being the top of your cup. So let's lay all these parts out so we can see what we have. The grinder has a slot that you pour your beans into down here, and a power button right here. You adjust the coarseness of the grind with this, which of course unscrews completely, and anybody that's used any kind of hand grinder will be familiar with this sort of system. It has conical ceramic burrs. Looking at this, is that upper one removable? Okay, it's got screws there, so that's obviously removable. You can presumably take this bottom part out to aid in cleaning, I'm guessing, should it get really gunked up. But you've got reasonably good access there. You can obviously get the brush in there, and then you can use your bulb blower to blow any debris out. But it's nice to see that it's got screw heads, so you can obviously remove this and get into the guts of the grinder. I thought that maybe this came out, but that looks like it's fixed into this part, which is actually good. That means that's going to make that really stable. So we've got the spring there, a nice firm spring, a square shaped arbor for the lower burr to locate on, so that remains, so that rotates with the arbor, and then the adjuster here, which I will screw back on. Oops. Trying to do this and keep everything in the frame as well, so excuse me a moment. Now obviously when you've got a rough idea of the grind that you need, you should only need to move it 1 or 2 clicks either way when you change beans. It's not an all-in-one in the sense that it makes hot water, of course it doesn't. They haven't yet made an all-in-one travel device that does the hot water as well. It just, you know, that's not something you're going to get. But if you're traveling, hotels or what have you, you can still have good coffee, and you'll always have a kettle. If you're out camping, you'll have a camping stove and so on. Now, having a very quick look at the instructions, to power up the grinder, you give it a double press. And you can see that going there. Now apparently it automatically stops. I don't know how it times that, or whether it's just timed to run for a certain period of time with approximately 12 grams of beans, which is what the measure line is there. I'm not entirely sure. We will find that out when we actually grind some beans. But that looks good. What I'm going to do just now, to give it a really good chance to hit the ground running and to make it as fair as possible, is I'm going to plug this in and we're going to give it a full charge. So I'm going to plug this into my laptop, I'm going to give it a full charge, and then I'm going to run some tests, grind some beans. The manual states that it will do about 15 grinds before it needs a recharge, which I think is pretty good. You know, a couple of days out camping and 15 grinds each should easily be enough. Plus as well, if you're out and about in the car, you can just plug this into your car and charge it up. And the fact that it carries its own grinder and the fact that it's electric is hopefully great. So I'm going to plug this in just now, and I will come back to this video when this is charged, and then we're going to do some grinding tests like I did with the other device that shall not be named, and we'll see how it performs. You can see that plugged in, we get a red charge light. The charge time is stated as 1.5 to 2 hours. I'm assuming that this charge light will either go off or turn blue when it's fully charged. And as you can see, the light does indeed turn blue when it is fully charged. At this point, I want to check the consistency of the grind, because a consistent grind means a consistent cup of coffee. So rather than grinding it into the basket or into here, I'm just going to grind it directly into here so we can see what's going on. We've got the lid removed so that the top of the grinder is exposed like so, and I'm just going to grind a small quantity, and these are just general cheap beans that I use to practice my latte art with, because I do generally drink my coffee black. I usually have one latte a day to practice my latte art really. I do like them, but I tend to use a cheaper bean for that, and for test purposes that's perfect because we're not wasting the good quality beans. So I'm going to pop my chronograph here. Let's just see how many that is. Yeah, as you can see, that's probably less than 6 grams of beans there. It's this is just purely for the purpose of testing. I'll close that so that they don't pop out. And this is currently wound in as tight as it will go. I'm going to back that out about 2 clicks, just to probably 3, because I don't want the burrs to score against one another unnecessarily. And then I'm going to time and see how long this takes. If necessary, I might speed this section up, because what I want to see is, when I tested this, it ran for about 6 seconds and switched itself off, and I think it has some kind of sensor in that tells it when it's not grinding anymore. I'm not sure how it does that, but we will see. So let's reset the chrono, and apologies first of all, my camera just kindly informed me it automatically stopped recording. Why, I don't know. I think it's because of the tablet it's hooked up to, which is over here, that I'm using as a monitor. I'm not sure, so, but apologies for that. That just automatically stopped itself, and that was 1 minute and 45 seconds of grinding. Now this was at almost the finest grind it will achieve, and realistically this is not going to be the typical grind that you will be using. So I'm going to reset that, in readiness for the next one. And for the next one, I'm going to deliberately go for as coarse a grind as possible, just like I did with the Cafflano video, because that is where discrepancies will show up in the coarseness of the grind. Now, I'm basing this against my Hario Slim hand crank grinder, which is my my travel grinder go-to with my AeroPress, and that gives a really good consistent grind across a wide range, and it's a very good design. So this one, we have got a nice, yeah, that's actually a nice, it's not quite espresso fine, but it's a good fine ground, and it's fairly consistent. I'm going to tip that into here for now. Just sweep that away. This is the problem with plastic containers, is the static. Grounds stick to plastic containers because of the static that's built up. The Hario Slim grinder has this exact thing occur to it, so I just want to get the majority of that out of there, so we're not confusing those grounds with the coarser grounds that we're going to do next. So what I'm going to do next is wind this out to a really coarse grind, and admittedly this will probably be a very extreme one that you wouldn't use for pour over, for drip filter, but one that you might use, for example, for a French press. So I'll go out as far as it will go and see, and that's obviously far too coarse. That's just crazy. So I'm going to wind that back in some. So we've still got a really coarse grind. Probably go with that. So, you know, a French press, or even a cold press, cold brew coffee. And I'm going to measure out the same amount of beans. Or as near as, damn it. Obviously we're not being super scientific, but that's near enough the equivalent of the beans that we ground in the previous one. And then I'm going to close the gate on that. And this should obviously grind considerably faster, but I'll time this one as well. But this is interesting because it shows that there's some clever little widget inside here which tells you, which tells it when there's no more beans and to stop grinding automatically, and I like that. That's clever. So and as suspected, that took considerably less time. That was actually just 52 seconds, just over 52 seconds. And for the same amount of beans, which is quite obvious that would be the case. But how clever is that? You know, I don't know how that works. I'm not sure what's going on inside there. I don't know whether there's something that tells the motor that it's not working as hard. It's just spinning freely, and to stop going, maybe something like that. I'm not entirely sure, but that's really clever. It essentially grinds until it doesn't need to grind anymore. And I think that's pretty clever. I like that. I like that. It doesn't explain anything in the instructions as to how that works, but it works. That's brilliant. And obviously if you start it with nothing in, it will shut itself off after just a few seconds. How great is that? I'm impressed with that. Anyway, let's take a look at the grounds. And as expected, we've got some very coarse grounds. That's actually probably sort of cold drip filter coarse. That's even coarser than you would normally go for French press, to be honest. That would be a long steep in a French press. But that's not looking bad at all. Now, there is some variation in the grounds, but compared to the vast wild variation that there was in the Cafflano, and that was at a less coarse grind, I'm sure, if memory serves, that is far better. Perhaps not quite as good as the Harry O Slim grinder, but not bad at all. What I'm going to do, just as a little sort of added control, or whatever you might want to call it, is just give that a bit of a brush round to push any loose ones in. I'm going to wind that in about 10 clicks, so we're probably somewhere in between, and that might be a reasonable kind of French press grind. And I'm going to do another one to see what the difference is. But first and foremost, I'm going to have to decant this. I'll just decant it into the filter for now. Do I have another container? No, I don't. That'll just have to go into the filter for now. So that's the coarsest, that's the finest. This is an in-between, and I will do like I did with the other. I'm going to go with the same amount of beans, as near as, and we will time this likewise with a good old 6139 Noog, and hopefully I've got enough battery, because it's flashing at me, but hopefully I've got enough battery to do this one. That was actually 1 minute and 7 seconds or thereabouts. So, right, at this point here, what I'm going to do is just, oh, that looks good, that looks good. I'm going to tip that out so you can see there's no cheating going on. My low battery is flashing. I'm going to quickly switch the batteries out. And in fact, I will leave that there so you can see with the time on my chrono, you can see that there's going to be no camera trickery in between. And I'm going to quickly swap out the batteries, and then we'll look at the grounds. So we've got the coarsest ones here, which I'll tip out here while we've still got a bit of battery, and the finest ones, which I will tip out here. And we'll have a look at those and then scoot in and have a proper investigation of them. Back in a second. Right, so we're straight back in. That was literally just a couple of seconds to swap out the battery, because I'm not using the plug-in battery pack. This is on my other camera. So we've got the finest, the middle, and the coarsest grind. Bear in mind it will go coarser than this, but this is, like I said, this is really sort of like gravel. This, you could tarmac the M1 with this. This would probably be suitable for a cold brew. This is actually probably a little bit finer than a cafetiere, I would say. I would say it could go a little bit coarser for a cafetiere, but that might be a happy medium for a drip filter. I will actually use that as a first trial run. So what I'm going to do now is scoot in up close, and we'll have an up close and personal look and investigation of these. But I can say now, this is looking much more promising. I'm really happy with this. I will point out as well at this point something that I like to make a note of. When I review things that I have bought. On some very rare occasions, I might actually look at something and give my thoughts on it, and it's an item that belongs to somebody else, such as my watch reviews. But if I review something, it's an item I've bought. I don't get sent freebies. I don't do paid reviews. I don't say nice things because somebody's given me something for free. I don't like reviews like that. I've had in the past a couple of people have offered to send me things for review, and I have made it quite clear that I will be open and upfront and stating that if I review these items, I will be stating that they've been sent to me, but I will still be honest in my opinions of them. Unsurprisingly, I have had about 3 offers of this, and I've had about 3, well, I think I had 1 reply saying we'll get back to you, and then I didn't hear anything from the other 2. Just kind of shows you, doesn't it, really? So the thing about buying the things you review is you can be brutally honest because it's your money that you've spent on them, and nobody can guilt trip you or strong arm you into saying nice things about them. So this was a Kickstarter that I backed. The Cafflano was a gadget that I bought outright and returned because it just wasn't fit for purpose, frankly. And likewise with any coffee gadget that I have reviewed, it's something that I've personally bought, and the thoughts are my own. So anyway, with that said, let's scoot in and take a look at the coffee grounds. Here we are up close and personal. I have left my watch there specifically and deliberately so that you can see there has been no swift editing or shenanigans going on. And we have got, so let me just twiddle the focus so you can see. Trying to look at the monitor, excuse me while I do this. So you can see the watch there, you can see we've barely moved. I've obviously not reset the chronograph, it's still stopped. And we have got, if I focus individually, we've got the 3 different grades. What I'm going to do just now is I'm going to move the various parts of the grinder. I'm going to move my watch as well now. I actually reset that so I can pop that back on my wrist and move it out of the way so I'm not getting coffee grounds all over it. And I'm going to sort of center in the frame and try and focus on that. Bear with me 1 second while I try and focus in on that. It's actually really hard on this display rather than the camera screen, but let me zoom in. That's better. There we go. So first and foremost, as you can see, let me just scoot the U over there. I think I've actually mixed a little bit of the fine stuff in with the medium there. Let's try and separate those a bit more. So first and foremost, we're looking at the really fine grind. Now this wasn't quite the finest, this was about 3 clicks out from fully in, but I didn't want to grind it fully in because I didn't want to mash the burrs together unnecessarily. But you can see that is a beautiful, consistent, very fine grind. Not quite espresso, but not far off it at all. I dare say if I clicked that in another couple of clicks, I could probably get an espresso type grind even out of that. So that's the finest. Let's move over here so we can look at we'll look at the coarsest actually next, because that was the really, really coarse. Now you can see there that is really coarse, but it's still reasonably consistent. And this is where all grinders, with the exception of something like my Mazza Super Jolly that I use for the espresso machine, this is where the majority of grinders, whether they be hand grinders or electric grinders, this is where they tend to fall down. Electric not so much, because they've usually got a ring that maintains the pressure all round evenly, but hand grinders definitely, because the coarser you go, the more flex in the burr you've got. Unfortunately with the other one, that was a bit of a failure. It just wobbled all over the place as soon as you went from the finest grind. But that is at a very wide setting that would be too coarse for French press cafetiere, but would be probably suitable for cold drip coffee, or cold brew coffee. And it's still relatively consistent. That's actually not bad at all for what's effectively a hand grinder with an electric attachment, which is essentially what this is. So with that one out of the way, let's scoot now to the medium, which I think should be a pretty decent grind for the drip filter, which is precisely what this is designed for. And that one, as you can see, is not bad at all. It's not perfect, there's a few bigger chunks in there, but if you look at that, if I spread that out quite nice and fine like I did with the fine one there, you can see that is actually pretty good and consistent. That's not bad at all. It's a few chunks, but certainly nothing worth moaning about. But even this one, as coarse as it is, I think I'm really pleased with this, and I'm glad, because I would have been very upset if the result of this would have been poor, because this is the bit that I was most worried about, because this is, as I say, where the Cafflano just really fell flat on its face and performed appallingly. So this is a good start. I'm pleased with that. I'm going to leave it there, and that is what I'm going to use for a practice grind for the first drip filter. So big thumbs up on that one. Let's zoom back out and sort the focus. So big thumbs up. Well done, BEANQUE. That's a great start. Very impressed indeed. This lot is now going to go into this beaker, and I'm going to have a good sweep up, because this is actually my workbench, and the last thing we want to start finding in watch movements is coffee grounds. But I've got to say, it smells fantastic. Now, I did say I was going to go straight on to brewing a cup of coffee. However, as you'll have seen by my watching the previous clip, it was very late when I'd filmed that bit, and obviously not practical to make a coffee at that time, so I thought I would leave it until the following day. And here we are the following morning. The coffee, the grinder's just been left with no further charging up of the battery. So as you saw, it's had three sorts of uses of grinding. I've measured out to the 12-gram line, which is about the same size as an AeroPress scoop as it happens. And opening up the grinder, I'm going to decant those beans into there. And I have actually been thinking about the usage of this in a day-to-day environment, such as, for example, taking it to work, or taking it on a trek, or camping, or what have you. And what I've thought is it would be very easy to bag up 2 or 3 measures of coffee beans, which I'll look at a little bit later, and have one already in the grinder, ready to go. So that's all in there, ready to go. It's ready to grind into the filter basket, which is here. I've had a close look at this, incidentally, and while those holes look rather large on the filter basket, there is actually a much finer mesh sandwiched between, so they're not as large as they look, so that should give a good drip filter result. So that's all ready to go to grind. I'm going to go and put the kettle on to boil, and then as the kettle boils, I'll run the grinder, by which time the water's cooled down from a full boil, just enough to be about the right temperature for pour over. So here's the kettle, literally fresh off the boil. I would have done this in the kitchen, but it's winter, and frankly the lighting in my kitchen is rubbish anyway. And especially in winter, it just doesn't get very bright at all. Hence doing it in here where I've got slightly better lighting. So that took a little while, but you know, when all things considered, we are asking quite a lot of a battery-powered portable grinder, but that's with the mid grind that I set yesterday or last night during the tests. As you can see, we've got a nice full basket. Clip out the arms. Make sure that's nice and level and sit that in here. And then I could of course just pour from the kettle, but I want to kind of go with the entire experience. Whoop. And we're at the max mark, which is literally just under the pour spout here. So let's put this, let's just focus on this. And I'm going to have to stand up for this bit here so I can see what I'm doing. And you get quite a nice controlled pour. And this is something that a lot of people aren't aware of with drip filter. And a lot of people tend to just sort of hurl the water in from the kettle. But what you want to try and do is give a nice controlled saturation of the grounds, allowing that to drip and not to displace the grounds too much to create a hollow where you're not getting even extraction. Ideally, I should have actually let that bloom a little first, but that's going quite nicely. I think that grind might actually be a little bit too fine for this. We will of course find out once it goes through, and this is all part of the coffee brewing process with any brewing method. You have to find the right grind that suits, and this is why grinding your own is important, along with the flavour of course, because fresh ground always gives you a far, far superior flavour. So I'll continue with this, and I will probably in editing speed this bit up. And I think we are about done. Initial impressions, very, very good. I'm impressed. I like that. I'm going to continue tasting that, and I'm going to leave a little to go cold, because that's the best way of telling if you're under or over extracted. And then from there I can tweak the grinder in and out to suit a little bit. This particular bean is, I think, a Costa Rica SHB single origin, which was roasted just yesterday to a mid roast, so it would take a little bit more grinding than a dark roast. But yes, so far I'm really, really pleased with this. So I'm going to go and just clean up this stuff here and dump the coffee grounds and clean that out, and then we'll have a bit more of a closer look at everything. So clean up of the brew basket was as simple as upend that into the bin, give it a rinse. I gave that a rinse with some hot water from the kettle, or hot water from the tap would do, and then just wipe that out with a paper towel. Obviously you could just leave that to air dry, and being a metal mesh, you could of course use something like Pulicaf if you have an espresso machine or some kind of detergent, or even just give it a good wash in washing up liquid and rinse it, and that should be good. Obviously, neglected to mention, but we have the lid, so I could of course screw on the lid and pop the thing open to drink it. I'm not going to do that because I'm not going to dirty the lid unnecessarily just now. Other than that, everything else is relatively clean. The grinder, give it a brush out, and of course all this has had in it are coffee beans and water, so again it's all good. And so far that's tasting pretty good. I think it might be a little over extracted, the slight hint of bitterness, so I think I might wind it out a click or two for the next one. That's very good. I'm really impressed with this. Really impressed. A couple of thoughts. I don't know yet what this is going to be like internally. Obviously, there's nothing in the instructions about taking it apart to clean, but it does have screws, which means that it does come apart, which is great. That means it's not a thermal sealed unit, which means you can't get into it to clean it, so that's a good thing. But we'll have a look at that later or in a separate video. The rest of it stays relatively clean. These bits are easy to clean. One bit that I was a little bit cautious about, just mention of the lid, we've got a silicone seal around the lip of the lid there, and that's a very generic kind of silicone seal, so the chances are you'll probably easily get replacements for that should you ever need, but these last a long time. They're very thermally friendly. One thing I did have slight concerns about when I first did it were these little opening tabs which sit on the rim of the cup for filtering into, because when you snap them out, they snap really firmly. They're really solid, and you can really put some weight on that without them folding. But when I first folded them back in, I had that, ooh, is this going to break something kind of feeling, because it's really stiff. But having opened and closed them now 3 or 4 times, they seem to have sort of settled in nicely, and they don't have that feeling anymore, and they're very strong. This, so far, fingers crossed, this is everything I wanted the Cafflano to be. Now, it wouldn't have bothered me in the slightest if this had been a hand crank grinder instead of electric. That's just a nice little bit of icing on the cake, because I can set that to grinding while the kettle's boiling, and I sit and read while it gets ready or what have you. It's fantastic. It's a nice little touch. I love the automation in how it knows that it's done grinding the coffee beans, and it will keep going until they're all ground. I think that's fantastic. I don't know how that's implemented, but I love it. It's very clever. I don't know if the Kickstarter guys have plans to take this to another platform. I don't know if they're going to sell it on a website. I don't know if they're going to offer it through retailers. I will try and communicate with them and find some information, because obviously this was just a Kickstarter campaign. They do have a Facebook page. I'll put the information down there. I'll be contacting them to see if they want to show this video on the Facebook page, and I'll try and get some information about potential retail outlets and what they're planning to do regarding this. If I had a coffee shop, I would happily stock and sell this. I would be delighted to, because it's a fantastic thing. But I will try and find out and get some information on, and I will also, I plan to use this for the next couple of weeks or so, and I'll also try and get some updates with regards to long-term use and see how well the whole thing holds up. Having finished the coffee, one thing that I did fail to mention is that the bottom of the tumbler has a foam rubber, not anti-slip gripping piece, which would probably make it not dishwasher friendly, I'm guessing. But it's very easy and straightforward to clean. So, thoughts overall as a package. I have to say I'm very impressed at the overall design. The Kickstarter campaign, all the information, the regular updates were all very good, and the item delivered is exactly what was described, which is always nice to see. And on the plus sides, it seems to work very well. For a battery powered grinder, I'm really impressed with how well it performs. Whether it will perform up to the standard of up to 15 grinds on one charge, we will find out. As I say, that will come in an update. I will test that. And on the whole, I'm really pleased with it. I'm very impressed. It's very good. It's exactly what it said it was going to be. So downsides, because there's always downsides to something, it's quite bulky overall, but a lot of that is because of the grinder, because it's a battery powered grinder, and because obviously it has an electric motor, it has a battery pack, it has all the charging gubbins that tell it what to do, and it has whatever fancy gizmo tells it when it's empty of beans. So had that been a hand grinder, this unit could have probably been dropped about a third in size at the top. But I'm certainly not complaining, because for the ease of just pressing a button and sitting back and watching it grind the beans for you, I think it's worth that extra little bit of bulk. The only other real sort of gripe I've got is I've found that this is a little loose. It doesn't clip on. I would have liked to have seen a little lip inside of here that clipped into this little ridge here. So carrying this like this, obviously there's a risk of this coming off. Now, obviously when you're carrying this, it's going to be most likely in a rucksack or a bag or something like. But if, for example, you were to pop the lid up and carry it like so and give it a jog, now it's typically not doing it, but my thinking along the lines of if that came loose and fell off, you could lose that. So it would have been nice to have seen just a little lip on the inside of this, because it's actually smooth. So rather than just relying on the friction of pushing it up, and it will hold, you know, but obviously there is that risk. Now, if it had a little lip, it would have snapped onto there and that would have felt more secure. But I think, all things considered, that's a pretty minor gripe. That could be resolved by a carry bag, which was sized that this would slip into, like the kind of thing you sometimes get with the AeroPress. You get a carry bag to put all the bits into. So a nice cloth carry bag with a drawstring at the top to pop it into will resolve that. And I will probably make myself one of those for it. It would have been nice if it came with it, but you know, we're just sort of splitting hairs and being particularly picky there. The rest of it is really well made. All screws together very solidly and firmly. The filter operates very nice and smoothly. The click adjust is good and firm. It's had a good strong spring to it. And aside from the bulk, the slight bulk which I mentioned, and this, which does seem a little loose. It may just be mine, I don't know. But aside from that, there's really nothing I can gripe about with it. I'm really, really pleased. The grind consistency is good. The whole design, the overall design is really good. It was available as a stretch goal in different colours. I'd already sort of ordered in mind with this particular one, and I decided I didn't particularly want to change it, but I think there was a pink one, a green one, maybe a yellow one, something like that. So, you know, if you wanted to change it up and be a bit more colourful, you had that option. And as I say, I will actually try and communicate with the BEANQUE guys and see what their plans are for future sales and such like, and what they plan to do with it with regards to extending it from the Kickstarter campaign that it was, because I think this would be a really good seller. This is the all-in-one travel solution that I was looking for, as far as I'm concerned right now. And until such a time as somebody makes one that does everything this does, that's built as well and that's a little more compact, this is now going to be my go-to travel companion. Sadly, that means the AeroPress won't be used quite as much, but I will still use that because I do love my AeroPress. And obviously I got the AeroPress Go recently, as you will have seen, and it's a little sad with regards to that, but I will try and use that as well. So, but yeah, it's great. I'm really pleased with it. So we'll wrap that up at that. So thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video.